On today's episode of Fresh Corduroy, we're talking about collegiate ski and snowboard competition, but not the NCAA version you usually hear about. We're diving into the U.S. Collegiate Ski and Snowboard Association, the USCSA, a 52-year-old organization that puts nearly 5,000 athletes on snow every winter across alpine, Nordic, snowboard, and freeski disciplines. Joining me are Executive Director Meegan Moszynski and VP of Academic Affairs Jay Moyer. We talk about why USCSA was created, how it balances inclusivity with high-level competition, what makes its team-based format unique, and what it's like to bring 700 athletes together for a week-long national championship. If you care about keeping athletes in the sport through college and for life, this one's for you. Now, let's get some fresh corduroy with Meegan and Jay. Meegan, Jay, welcome to Fresh Corduroy.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Always fun to talk collegiate ski racing, snowboarding, etc., especially as one ages and gets on in life and looks back fondly upon their collegiate years. So happy to have the both of you and have this conversation. Before we talk about all things collegiate skiing and snowboarding, want to hear about your skiing origin stories. Meegan, I guess we'll start with you. What is Meegan's skiing origin story? Where and when did you get started skiing?
Had a very lucky upbringing. I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut, and my dad was a huge skier. He grew up in Poland, in Europe, and he loved to ski out west. So he took us out to Utah whenever he could. He traveled a lot for work, so he would bank his miles, and we would go ski snowboard. So I mostly learned how to ski snowboard. I remember doing the cookie doodle races as a kid there, which were, I want to say Thursdays. I could be wrong on that, but I have a little picture of myself fully in the back seat at like 6 or 7, doing a cookie doodle down by one of the gad shares. So was lucky enough to grow up skiing mostly out west, and just fell in love with it from the age of 3 onward.
It's amazing that a Connecticut resident didn't start at Mount Southington or Mohawk. Jay, do you have something as worldly as Meegan?
I don't know if quite as great as that, but I did learn to ski from my dad as well. He got me involved at a very, very young age too. I think I was on Nordic skis pretty much shortly after I could walk. And I do remember going alpine skiing probably about the age of 5 at Ski Liberty. I grew up in Maryland as another East Coaster. An interesting tidbit though, since we're talking a little bit about ski racing, I did not start ski racing until I got to college. So this is pretty much the way I got involved in the sport was when I went to Penn State. I learned that Penn State had a USCSA team and figured I'd try it out. And 20 years later, still involved. So yeah.
That's terrific. Yeah, well, I think once you get hooked early on, you're destined to stay in the sport for life. So that obviously holds true for me and just about everybody I talk to. So let's talk about the USCSA. For listeners who may or may not be familiar with it, what is it? Let's start with that. And of course, how does it differ from the NCAA? Collegiate skiing?
Yeah, I'll take that first. And then I want Jay to answer it too, because I think sometimes we all answer it slightly differently. USCSA stands for the U.S. Collegiate Ski and Snowboard Association. We are now 52 years old, so started in 1974, originally in the Midwest. And we are a league, a national governing body that offers collegiate competition in alpine ski, Nordic ski, snowboard, freeski, or freestyle and alpine, and freeski. And we have about 5,000 athletes that compete, that are all, for the most part, college athletes across the country in all of those disciplines throughout the season in, I think, 38 states we're up to right now, where we have students coming from, including Florida and, places that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And then we have 6 regions that hold our regional events, and then ultimately a national championship. So we like to think of ourselves as a large, broad, inclusive organization that offers college athletes the opportunity to participate from a range of skills. And I know we'll probably talk about this more, but Jay's origin story is such a great example of that. Of we have kids who, have ever since they were young and want to go to school and ski or snowboard and compete. And then some who get to school and kind of go to the fair as a freshman and are kind of like, oh, wow, there's a ski team here. That's cool. I'm going to do that. And here Jay is. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that a little bit. We obviously are a collegiate snow sport organization, but our two main pillars are team competition, which is a little bit different than a lot of ski and snowboard competition you see elsewhere. We really emphasize, competing as a team and qualifying for our national championships as a team, which definitely adds a unique aspect to the sport. And we've heard time and again that really reinvigorates people who have kind of been burnt out for whatever reason. Adding in a team aspect and being there to support your fellow teammates really brings a whole new life into the sport. On top of that, we're also, as Meegan mentioned, a very inclusive organization. Whether you're a 30-point fist racer or we're just starting to get into whichever your sport is, we have a home for you, and we'd love to, show you what snow sport competition is. And, the goal for everyone is to keep people involved in the sport as long as they would like to be. And I think collegiate snow sport competition is a great way to do that.
And I think you alluded to this in the answers, but I would say, why was the USCSA created? And in what problem is it designed to solve for within collegiate snow sports? It may have been started with skiing, but it's certainly expanded since its creation. But what is the genesis of it in terms of why was it started, and what is its broader mission?
Opportunity, really. There is a really small field in the NCAA league, and fair enough. And, a lot of the impetus for starting this organization was to provide the opportunity for more people to be able to compete in college. And there are so many people who want to participate. And when you limit the number of people, while that creates a level of competition for sure, it also can minimize the opportunity for some people who still want to be able to get out there. And so and I would say on top of that, an interesting aspect of this organization is I also wasn't a ski racer in college. I was actually a swimmer. And so another aspect of this is it's an opportunity, and I think this was part of the genesis also, was to get people engaged in snow sports. Whether, again, you were before college or you get to college and are then interested in getting involved, but then you have more people interested in working in the industry, participating as guests at resorts, and it creates this this larger community, both from a professional standpoint and a recreational standpoint beyond college as well. So I think there was a lot of that component.
And how has it evolved over time? I mean, I look at it today, and the number of sports or disciplines that you rattled off is pretty impressive. I don't know that, well, frankly, snowboarding wasn't around in the 70s. So, it didn't start with snowboarding included. So how has it evolved since its inception?
Snowboarding was included, at least in our national championships, in the 90s. And but originally alpine obviously was at the beginning, and then Nordic as well. So a couple decades into it, we expanded into snowboard. And at some point, to my knowledge, and again, I'm going to have Jay jump in on what he knows in this area too, but we compiled our history 2 years ago when we turned 50 and tried to nail down some of these numbers. And it was an interesting exercise in going through what's data and what's anecdotal. But I've heard so many amazing stories about how there was a rec component to USCSA in the past as well. And that was an opportunity to expand membership beyond just competition, but include more of those clubs at some of the schools and really get people, again, just engaged in the sport and having fun. And so I don't know what the numbers were at the time, but it was much larger because there, it wasn't about field size or, the venue and whatnot. And so it's wavered in size and is a bit of an apples to orange comparison over the years, if you will, in that sense. But again, inclusiveness and inclusion have always been at the heart of what the organization's been about. And that's looked different over the years, but has really come to fruition in where we are today. Jay, do you have additional anecdotal history on some of that I missed or even misspoke about possibly?
So the only thing I know of, which is a really interesting and I think amazing fact about USCSA, is we were actually the first collegiate women's championship in snow sports, and that was pretty early on, well before Title IX came out. So back in when our organization started, it was only there were only men's NCAA national championships, and we saw that as an issue. Obviously, I was not around back then, but the leaders back then saw that as a problem and wanted to include women as well. So we started awarding women's national championships very early on in our history. So that just kind of goes again to show that our mission has always been to make sure everyone is included, gets equal representation at our national championships, and is able to really show off what they've been able to achieve throughout their lifetime of athletic practice and performance. So it also, I don't want to completely spoil anything, but we've also added new sports as they've come to us. So we have in the past hosted Nordic jumping when we've had a lot of people come to us saying they want to participate in Nordic jumping in college because there's not a home for that. And we're even working towards adding freestyle moguls as well in a couple conferences this year. So again, it's a really key part of USCSA, and I think that's going to be one of the things that we always carry with this organization is inclusivity and finding people a home.
Yeah, what's interesting there is, and you talk about ski jumping and moguls, there's no other avenue to compete in those disciplines at a collegiate level, and obviously a number of the other sports that you mentioned, alpine ski racing, Nordic ski racing. There are alternatives, albeit very limited and very competitive. How does that fit in? I just think I think about that. It gives an opportunity for people who grew up competing in these various disciplines to do it at the collegiate level. And I wonder, does that? And I don't know if it's even a thought of the USCSA, but help encourage people to stick with those sports. Through their teen years, and because there is a place for them in college to do it, or it's sort of, I've thought about the attrition problem in certain disciplines because they're like, hey, I can go play baseball or field hockey or lacrosse, and I can play that in college. None of these sports don't have that pathway. Is that fit into your thinking in terms of what sports you bring into the fold, or is it just I want to create an opportunity for collegiate students, college students to continue a passion of theirs, or as you said, try something for the first time?
I'd say all of those, and some of it is a bit of a cart horse. Are you providing the opportunity so people have it, or do people want the opportunity so we provide it? Is kind of what you're asking. And I think it's a little bit of both. It also depends on the structure of the school and, are we talking club teams or varsity teams? And so I think there's a component too of what's available at the school. Sometimes the size of the school, the budget of the school, all of those kinds of factors fit into it also. But, I feel like I often come back to this, and we'll probably repeat it several times as we're chatting, but a lot of it is about the opportunity to engage. And a lot of people go to college for academics, and a lot of people go to school for sports. And I think that there's this really cool opportunity to provide a specific sports that is unique and not available elsewhere, as you said, which is what it makes USCSA really special and unique. And as we look to bring in additional disciplines like moguls, which is just so cool, to be able to have a platform that can take that on is really special for us. And at the same time, requires some dedication and expertise from a whole crew of volunteers who help us run this organization. We are largely volunteer led. There's me and one or two other people who help out, all part-time. But other than that, we have a dedicated crew of alumni, Jay being a great example of people who just love the organization and want to continue supporting. And without that, it's really hard to put on some of these events. And as we look at, again, Moguls as an example, we have a crew of people who are experienced putting on those events, and that's probably why this will work. And same thing with Nordic jumping when we were providing that. So it's part of it's the demand, part of it's the supply and the expertise. So it's all of the above, I would say.
Well, the volunteers is interesting. Where do the volunteers come from? You talk about it like at any given race. There's, I imagine there's some paid people who are supplied effectively by the mountain, timing, whatever but there must be all the volunteers, whether they be gatekeepers or the starter or the hand timers, or, I don't know. You generally follow USSA rules, I think, for alpine racing. Presumably it's similar in the other events. There are officials and others that need to be around. It's a large contingent of people. I've, tried to wrangle people to volunteer their time for, 12-year-old races. So and parents aren't around at college as much as we may want to. Where do the volunteers come from?
Parents are my first answer.
Okay.
So we do some parents. And then you have some parents who stick around, if their kid is going to school nearby and then they actually really love volunteering, they'll keep doing it. A lot of alumni maybe go to school in one place and then live somewhere else. So it doesn't mean if you went to school in upstate New York and now you live in Utah, you don't need to volunteer only in New York. You can now volunteer in the Rocky Mountain Conference or the Grand Teton Conference. And so we're available all over. So alumni is a huge component for sure. And again, a dedicated group of people who just love participating. I think there is definitely, well, I know for sure, I don't think I know, there's definitely a partnership, obviously, with the resorts. Whenever we have events, there are people there, of course, who need to be involved, but we always bring in a crew of volunteers to help put on the event. We wouldn't be able to do any of our events without the volunteers. But it does differ in different parts of the country. I think for the most part, we're pretty, we come in prepared and we have all of what we need for the most part. And I think oftentimes what I hear from resort partners is, oh, wow, you guys are very, it's not a huge lift to host a USCSA event, because you do come with people who know what they're doing. And that's really helpful. Jay is the former conference coordinator for the Rocky Mountain Conference. And so I think he can probably speak directly about some of his experience too and volunteer recruitment.
Yeah, everything you said, Meegan, is accurate. It's, very, very heavily alumni driven, which is fantastic because, the alumni are the people who were racing and know exactly what our races look like. But just to, add to that a little bit more is that, we all know snowboarding and skiing is extremely expensive. You're traveling around, you're buying lift tickets. When we go to races, if you're going to have a race, you usually need to pay the mountain quite a bit of money. But the more volunteers we have, the cheaper we're able to offer our events. So that's one of the main reasons why I think USCSA has been able to keep our costs relatively low, at least from a national and even at the conference level, is because so many people love the sport so much that they're willing to come back. And we are able to hire less of those people, like you mentioned, Craig, that need to fill those important roles. If you come to our races, you will notice they are almost exactly like a US ski and snowboard or a USSA race or FIS race with all the key officials and safety precautions taken into effect. But what you may not notice below the surface is most of those people travel around each weekend to our races. So there are a couple course crew that will probably be from the mountain, but a lot of them are volunteers. So it does vary a little bit from conference to conference. Some have a lot more volunteers than others. Our nationals, though, is a great example where we bring, 40, 50 volunteers to that event. And there's almost no way we could do that event without those people for the cost that we're able to put it on for. So Yeah, just a shameless plug that if you really love ski racing and you've been through USCSA, please come back and help us out. We'd love to have you.
You can have all the shameless plugs you want during the. Feel free. Yeah, but look, skiing across disciplines requires volunteers in many ways. Even if you think about it, just recorded an episode with the CEO of the National Ski Patrol. If you think about Ski Patrol at most areas, put aside the major resorts in the West, they're volunteer positions, right? So I think we're surrounded by volunteers, and oftentimes we don't recognize it or realize it. So one of the other things that I wanted to touch on is it's USCSA teams, generally speaking, are club based, or they're club organizations at the schools, as opposed to a varsity, paid sports program. How does that, change or alter the experience, at the races and as a team, than what one might find in a traditional varsity sport?
I think there are a couple different ways to answer that. And one of the ways that I'll address it is it's an opportunity. Oftentimes as a club team, there's a little bit less structure. Not always, but oftentimes. And so there's a little bit more responsibility put on the athletes to recruit, fundraise if they need to, make sure they've got all the paperwork they need in place for the school, set up practices, do they need a coach, transportation to events, budgeting, all of that kind of stuff. That oftentimes with the varsity team is managed by the school. And again, some of the club teams are as well. But a lot of what we try to work on with our student athletes, our members, whether they're setting up a new team or inheriting a team, junior becomes a captain and now a senior from graduating seniors, is how to adults and how to run what is oftentimes essentially a small business. There are expenses. We talked about how skiing is expensive, and you need to make sure that all your teammates are registered, that you've gone through your eligibility process, that you are in communication with your conference coordinator, they know that you exist, you know what the schedule is, you're signing up for them, you have your transportation there, like all of the things that go into running or managing a team, if you will. And so oftentimes there's that component that's added when it's a club team. So it's just structured a little bit looser. But again, I want Jay to talk about what his experience has been in the Rocky Mountain Conference, because we have both out here, don't we, in the Rocky Mountain Varsity Club?
Quasi. We have one school that's sort of run under the athletic department, Colorado Mesa University. Mostly club though, and that's pretty similar with a lot of the conferences. There sometimes are, a couple of RC programs, but a lot of club programs. To your point though about running a program, I will say that, I went to Penn State, and Penn State is a club program. It is an amazing business and leadership opportunity to be a officer, as we call them, or, other team captain on a club program. Because you're essentially, if you're the president, you're like the CEO. You're hiring coaches, you're organizing travel. If you're the treasurer, you're like the CFO, you're managing a fairly large budget. I think for Penn State, it was tens of thousands of dollars of transactions per year that you had to manage and take a fine-tooth comb to make sure we're collecting and spending wisely. And when you go to apply to jobs, that really sticks out. I would say, for my first job out of college, the interview was mostly about being the treasurer of a ski team and managing tens of thousands of dollars. That was a pretty great learning experience. So just because it's a club program does not mean that you're not going to get less of an experience because it's not varsity. You're actually going to probably get more leadership and fulfillment out of it because you're truly watching, your product, be created because you're running the team. So I would say, to any prospective students out there to keep an open mind and look at, what the program truly entails and, see if it could be a good fit for your future skiing, snowboarding, or life goals.
And so you talked about the experience and the skills that it provides. some of those things coming off the hill, right? It's in the organization and logistics, if you will. How does that fit into USCSA's thought around balancing, say, competitiveness versus inclusivity and fun, entertainment, however you want to phrase it? Is that at the national level? Is that at the regional level, or division, depending on where we're talking about? And Jay, I think you and I have had this conversation before about you're a big tent, right? You're trying to include a lot of different people, but within the big tent there are different desires and different ones. So how do you think about balancing competitiveness with those other aspects of the organization?
Yeah, I'll start, and Meegan, feel free to jump in. But yeah, it is always an interesting balancing act, especially from the national level, because we do have some extremely competitive teams, especially in the McConnell Division of the East, which is a FIS level conference, and then also a lot of club athletes. So what I always tell people, at least from the national level, is no matter what your goals in college are, you can find a home somewhere. And that's a little bit, that's easy to say from the national level. It's a little bit harder to say if you're looking at, a specific region or even a specific state that you want to go to college in. But no matter what your goals are, you can achieve them and get to the national championships via the USCSA. So if you are, just going to a small school that doesn't even have a USCSA team, we can help you start one. Even as an individual, there is an avenue to qualify to national championships. It's a little bit more difficult than qualifying as a team. But we also encourage people to look at, what you want out of a school as opposed to just out of, skiing or snowboarding. Your life is important, and making sure that your educational goals come first is always, in my opinion, should be the priority. And then from there, we hope we can get you to a point where you want in your athletics to also achieve those athletic goals. So again, it is a big tent. We hope to be able to offer a competitive avenue for everyone. And when you get to our national championships, you'll see some absolutely fantastic racers, some of which have, Europa and NORAM Cup experience. And then some people who have qualified with the team who, otherwise would probably have never dreamed of going to national championships. So, but yeah, go ahead, Meegan.
I was going to make a joke that Craig soft plugged 3 of our core values in his question, which was so inclusiveness, fun, and competition are three of our 5 core. Well done with your homework, or maybe you just guessed. And then community and development are the other 2. And so of those 5 core values that we've defined as an organization, we actually literally structure them in a circle. And the way that we like to talk about it is that you can sort of spin the circle so that the core values that mean the most to you are at the top and the other ones are on the side, kind of going down, if you will, in the shape of a circle. And the intention there is that USCSA is a little bit different to everybody. And that's where the big tent works, is that some people are there, they just want to have fun. And that's great. And some people are there because they're competitive. And for them, this is competition and this is really important. And for most people, there's a sense of community that comes with that. And so for each core value, there's a different level of attachment that all of our student athletes, connect to USCSA through. And it's just a really cool organization in that sense, and pretty unique in that we like to be able to provide for everybody. That said, there are rules and parameters and all of the things that everybody needs to follow, of course, but I've only been to a couple races. I'm behind my computer a lot of the time running the things, but I've been to a few in the Rocky Mountain Conference, actually, since I live in Colorado. And I saw such a range of skills at one of the events that I was at. And that was so cool. And a range of sort of level of preparedness and sort of nervousness from the athletes based on their level of experience. And, I've been doing this since I was 3 versus I just started. And that to me just encapsulated what this organization, provides for as an opportunity to athletes. And I think that's just the coolest.
It is. Look, I think the fact that you offer it up to such a broad swath of people across, sports or disciplines and experience levels is enticing, right? Um, it's a nice opportunity for college students to be able to participate in something that, at least among friends here, we all love, right? It's why we're involved in the sport the way we are, or like me, we talk about it an awful lot. Um, so shifting gears a little bit, I mean, talk about the college. I did do some homework, Meegan, so some of this stuff is intentional. But Jay, your title is the Vice President of Academic Affairs. What does that cover? What does that mean vis-a-vis the USCSA?
So academic affairs is, I would say it's a pretty broad position. We do look primarily at making sure that everyone is academically eligible to compete, to keep a level playing field and making sure that people are being students first. That's always very critical for hopefully every collegiate sport organization. We also look at different ways to make sure everyone is not only academically eligible, but also eligible or qualifying for our championships in a similar manner. So there are a couple of rules about how to qualify to national championships and make sure that you are competing in enough regular season and regional competition in order to get there. So we will occasionally work with conferences and schools to make sure that they're following those rules. Just for everyone's awareness, at this time, it is something that we are always looking at a USCSA national level. But we do follow NCAA Division II rules. So if you're a prospective athlete and are wanting to know exactly what you need to do in order to become eligible to compete in the USCSA, take a look at those rules. They're very similar to what most people probably assume they need to do in order to get into a collegiate snow sport team. Basically, you just need to have a certain GPA as well as be a full-time student. But that's the majority of what academic affairs is. And then in addition to that, I also do a lot with our marketing program, which includes a lot of outreach to US Ski and Snowboard, some ski racing media. So just basically trying to get the word out about USCSA to as many people as possible and make sure everyone knows about the collegiate pathways that they can follow in order to, again, compete in college.
And so you talked about it. Like, what are the eligibility / GPA requirements? If the kid is, got a straight D, are they eligible? How strict and stringent are you relative to being able to participate in both regular season events and perhaps the postseason?
So it does depend a little bit about where the athlete is in college. If they're a freshman, their eligibility will be determined based upon their high school GPA, which I believe has to be a 2.2. Don't quote me on that, but it is in the NCAA Division II rules. And then once you do get to college, after you compete for one season, your sophomore year, your eligibility is dependent on your freshman year GPA. And again, making sure that you have achieved the appropriate credit hours, which is generally whatever a school determines as full-time, which is generally about 12 credits per semester. Again, if people are deemed ineligible, they are able to appeal that ineligibility to us, and we'll look at if they have had any hardships or other situations going on. Again, following the hardship rules of Division II, just to make sure everyone, again, is on that level playing field.
I guess let's talk about how the regular season works, right? What does it look like? When does it start? When does it end? Etc. I don't know who wants to take that one.
I'll take that one. It starts for the athletes usually in January, and it's short. It's, after the holiday season. So early January, we've got about 6 weeks of events in season conference events. January through about mid-February-ish. So we're coming up on the last week or so. It depends on the conference and the region and what their schedule looks like. And that depends on, your local resorts schedule, a calendar, all those kinds of things. So about 6 weeks of in-season competition, and then regionals start. So we have 6 regionals throughout the country, and those are usually, President's weekends and the weekend after that kind of time frame. And then nationals is the first or second full week of March. Again, kind of depends on the calendar. So by about mid-March, the season is usually done. And by season, I mean, the on-hill part. There's tons of stuff going on off-season. I remember when I first started working in the ski industry, one of my naive questions in one of my interviews was, what do you guys do in the summer? They sort of laughed at me and were like, a lot, all the work that you don't do when you're on hill or, responding to people who are on hill. And that's when we are working on rules updates and marketing initiatives and all of the things you write down on all the stickies throughout the winter. Next year we should do this, and you put all the stickies together and then you do those things. So in the spring we have our our annual conference, where a lot of the board and our conference coordinators and student athlete representatives, which is another great opportunity for student athletes to get involved in the organization, soft plug. So we all get together and talk about how the season went, but also any other strategic initiatives that we need to kind of get group consensus on, or feedback, ideas, challenges that have come up, etc. And usually start to go over the annual report. What did the season look like, and what other external factors were, maybe correlated? Was it a bad snow year, a good snow year, etc. And then summer is quieter, but not totally quiet. And then we open registration in September, and the fall is really busy from an admin kind of perspective. We get a lot of new captains asking questions about how to register and how to talk to their registrar about academic eligibility and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a year-round initiative for sure. But the on-hill part is January to mid-March for the most part.
So for the students, I guess January to mid-March is what they see is most visible. But then there's that fall component where they're setting the team up and doing their own administrative stuff that's necessary to run a ski racing, or I shouldn't say ski racing, I should say a competitive snow sports club team.
And training. That's the other part.
Right.
Building the team, training, all of your work to then be able to get to your events and
yeah. What surprises people when they get to USCSA national championships? I have not been. I'm aware of them. I have tuned into some of the streaming broadcasts just to check it out. But I don't think they are a substitute for actually being there in person. So what would surprise folks about the national championships?
I think we should both answer this. So the way that I would answer that is, one is that it's large. We have almost 700 athletes at nationals because we have so many events. So there are a lot of athletes there. It's long. It's a whole week. It's 5 days of events, which is pretty unusual. And it's really fun. That's what we hear from everyone, is what a great time they're having. And a lot of that is just because it's, the end of the season and it's your postseason and it's the national championship. So of course it's going to be fun, but also because you have the opportunity, because of the way USCSA is designed and we set up the national championships, to watch other sports happening. The Rail Jam is 2 runs over from where the alpine ski is taking place. And on the last day, we do the alpine ski dual slalom right next to the snowboard alpine slalom is that day, right? And GS is on Thursday. I think I have that right. And so it's just really cool because you get to see a lot of different sports. And on Thursday, the Nordic athletes are usually off for a training day. So then we have a lot of Nordic athletes who come onto the alpine hill and get to watch alpine events, and you get to see them on alpine skis, which is always really fun. And so it's a happy event. And I think the last thing that I would put on that list that surprises people is, as Jay alluded to earlier, the fact that we bring a crew of about 50 volunteers that put on that event, and that they take a week off of their job or whatever it is that they do when they're not volunteering for USCSA, and they come to Lake Placid or to Mount Bachelor in Oregon, and they help put on this event, and they're, setting up gates and skiing around with drills and putting up these, inflatable arches and just doing whatever we need all week long to make sure this event goes off without a hitch and is fun and is competitive and is, again, with everything that USCSA stands for. And that always really, I think, people are flabbergasted by that. It's one thing to say that, but as you said, Craig, it's another to be there and to see it and to see all the people skiing around helping and just really realize that everyone is just so excited to be there and dedicated. It's a long week, but it's really fun.
Yeah, and I'll try to answer this from two different perspectives. So as a former athlete, I went to my first national championships, I think in 2007, and it's obviously grown a lot since then. We've added events, we've increased the number of people who are going. But even in 2007, having never been to a major national event, I was blown away by just the sheer size of it and the activities that we put on throughout the entire week, all the way from the first night of opening ceremonies through multiple days of events, through our closings banquet. It's really, really a great experience for students, and especially students who may have never even been to a event of that caliber, to really get a feel for it and to kind of experience that, wow, this really is the national championships and this is a big event. And then from a kind of more admin / race organizing standpoint, I hope people get, a really great impression on the production quality that we put into it. I've worked several World Cup events and several other high level US skiing events, and we are right there with, getting everything to look as great as it can be, getting all the details. Meegan mentioned these inflatable banners that we have that we put up that kind of mimic the World Cup banners you see on TV. We really want the show to kind of speak for itself as you get there, to say, wow, this is a big event and it's really important, and it's a two-way street. These athletes have put in a lot of time and effort to be there, so we want to give them a good product, and we also want the athletes to know that we really do value their time and want to give them the best experience they can get.
So a few things that I heard. I mean, you have put 700 college students together in one location. It sounds like spring break, sort of. And you talked about fun as being one of your, key components. Is there put aside the competition, I would imagine there's a healthy dose of socializing and other fun, however you want to describe it, at these events. Am I wrong? Am I looking to have things changed? I don't think they have since I went to college.
If I'm reading between the lines of what you're asking,
I would imagine there's a few parties going on.
I would imagine that too. We're not invited. I don't go to the parties if they're happening. So I'm working on like press releases with Jay and like all the things at night. I mean, we need our own downtime, so we have that for sure. I know. So a lot of the teams come and they'll rent a house or a hotel room with like a bunch of bunk beds or whatever. So of course there is a social component for sure. People are having fun. We also have rules around no drinking at USCSA events, and we have rarely had to work to enforce that kind of thing. So I really think that there is a healthy dose of, enjoying the outdoors without needing anything else. And then probably at night there's some libations happening, but again, like not per us. Yeah, I had another train of thought that I lost my train of thought on, but yeah, I know what I was going to say. It's a fair question. There's an element of USCSA that has really in the past 10-ish years, maybe or so, taken this extra step, I think, from this reputation in the past a while ago, but some of these things permeate of being a less professional organization than we are today. And I think that, again, I wasn't racing years ago, but I think that there is an element of the organization that has professionalized for sure. And as Jay said, we put on this very huge production at nationals, and our broadcast team is they're also fun, but very serious. They've been with us for about 15 years now. And so we really try to balance that out by making sure that everyone is enjoying themselves. This is supposed to be serious and also, enjoyable, but also making sure that it's professional and that all of the, materials that everyone needs before they get there are, professional and spiffy and well branded and well communicated, and same when they're on site and afterwards as well. And that the parents feel like they have the information they need to find their athlete who's racing, or, all of that, those kinds of components. And so, I think that we've tried really hard to make sure that there's a balance there, and that everyone is enjoying themselves and also feeling like this is a big deal.
Yeah, and
That's great.
one thing I will say is we do provide a lot of great activities in addition to just the snow sport competitions. Especially at Lake Placid, our opening ceremonies, we always tried to have a lot of really great events for people to do. It takes place. I don't know what the plans are yet this year, Meegan. Maybe you do, but we've done it at the hockey rink where for the Miracle on Ice took place. We've had curling and other things that kids can do, while they're there. But again, speaking from an athlete perspective, I have a lot of really great friends, not only from the Penn State ski team, but also on teams that we compete against. You're with the same teams for 4, 5, 6 weekends out of every season. So you're seeing a lot of the same people who have a lot of the same great ambitions and experiences. So when you get to some of these events, you hang out with them and have great times, and that includes nationals. And you're making lifelong friends, not only with your team, but with a lot of other, teams as well, and meeting people from all across the world, frankly.
One of the really cool things that I get to do after nationals each year is go through the many photographs that we take. And a lot of the photos that we use throughout the year on our website and newsletter and everything like that are taken at nationals. And particularly in Nordic, because they're just wearing less. Well, I guess in alpine as well, but you see this more in the Nordic photos. But there are so many photos at the end of the races of athletes hugging. And they're often wearing, you can see on the sleeve or the side or wherever it is, suits from different schools. And I think that's a combination of knowing each other beforehand and getting to know each other throughout the week. But there is this like cross-pollination across schools of being excited to be there with each other and supporting each other too, which is just so great.
It sounds like a fun time. I wish I could have participated in something like that when I was younger. But so let's shift gears for a moment and talk about high school students and their families who are thinking about college. This is an annual sort of thing. We're beyond the season right now, the application season, but hopefully this episode will live on for some time. How should a high school student who's thinking about college approach the topic of competition, whether it's ski racing, Nordic, whether that Nordic or alpine, rail jam, you ski cross, whatever the various disciplines, et cetera, are, how should they think about USCSA in their equation, if you will?
So we're going to answer this in a lot of different ways, I think. So I'm going to take my first and then I'm going to have Jay add on. This is such a huge topic that we have put a lot of work and effort in to. So a couple different things. So one is, I'm going to make a generalization in saying this, but I think for the most part, alpine skiing and Nordic, oftentimes high school athletes and parents know what their options are, and then the questions become more nuanced. I want to know what school has a club team versus a varsity team or things like that. But they oftentimes have an awareness of what's out there. We get a little bit more of the question around, how do I figure out what school offers what I'm interested in when it's a more specific snowboard or rail jam or Freeski question, like, does this school have a team that goes to rail jam events, very specific like that. So we have a couple different tools that we've created to basically try to help athletes and parents make some decisions. And we have a bit of a decision tree, I would call it, that we have on our website and some of our materials, where we basically encourage people to look at things in a couple different ways. Do you know for sure that you want to go to school out west? Or you for sure want to go to school back east, or whatever? Or do you know for sure that you want to go to a school that has a varsity team? Like kind of start with your main criteria and then go from there. And then we have like all the different ways that you can find out your options based on the decisions that you are making. We oftentimes like to connect parents and athletes with the conference coordinator if it comes down to geography, because they just know their schools better than we do at the national office level. We have a whole page on our website for prospective athletes that basically has that tree and a whole bunch of information that we've worked on, a presentation that Jay often gives about collegiate pathways. We've spent a lot of time, again, this is a lot in Jay's world, with US Ski and Snowboard, only in the alpine and Nordic fields, of course, about what the differences are across the leagues, because oftentimes we get some of those questions. So there's a lot of information to know. And I would say, again, a general comment that in general, what we hear is that there tends to be either a lack of awareness about USCSA at all, or a lack of awareness about what all the options are or the levels that are available. And so the more information that we can get to folks to even just start to kind of play around on the website or reach out to us is awesome. And the last thing that we've set up that I want to make sure we mention is we've done this in the last fall, and I think the fall of 23 was the last time we had done it, was a collegiate info night. We do it in partnership with US Ski and Snowboard, and we also invite NCAA coaches to talk high level about the USCSA, and then we do breakout rooms per discipline so people can ask alpine ski specific questions. And our hope and ambition is to do those a couple of times a year. So we have a fall one, but a spring one too, so that, as juniors are getting ready to think about, or sophomores or whatever, they can come. A lot of parents come to those and follow up with questions, which is fair. And so the more that we can, when I used to run the National Ski Patrol, and I felt the same way about a lot of things there, which is sometimes you put all of this work into this project and you get it out there and you share it. And then the next year you get the same set of questions and you're like, what? But we already went through all of this. And it's because you are now dealing with new parents with a new set of, every year you've got new students and new parents. And so we have to repeat ourselves, which isn't in the end repeating it for other people, but set this cadence, if you will, of available information so that people know what the options are.
So where is the disconnect between, getting the information in the hands of the, high school students and the parents and your organization, right? You talk about you're setting up info sessions, but someone's got to lead them there, right? Unless you are spending money on Super Bowl ads or something like that, which you don't have that budget, I'm assuming. Why isn't the message reaching as much as you want it? I'm not saying it's not reaching. It's just you think that every once in a while there's some senior who comes along and didn't realize there was an opportunity, as you just said. How would there be a more efficient information path? What should be done? Is it coaches? Is it high school guidance counselors? Where do we need to educate more? All of the above.
Yeah. I mean, and it's almost in some ways this piecemeal approach, I think, where, we're starting to think about how can we send out some comms to high school, not guidance counselors, college counselors and coaches and, again, parents. But, again, how are we supposed to compile a list of all the ski parents out there? That's hard. But I think, one of the things that we are tracking better now than we used to is where our particular first year athletes are coming from. Like, what school did you go to? Did you go to Ski Academy? Did you know about USCSA while you were there? If so, tell your friends. And also let's put that on our list of people to start contacting. So we're starting to build out some of those comms. And I know that USCSA has worked on that, before my time as well. And so I think it's partly a better effort on our part. I think it's partly just tradition. Like, people know the NCAA, and that's just kind of what they know. And, the Olympics are happening right now, and a lot of the athletes went to a handful of schools that we all hear about. And I think there's just a general lack of awareness. I think we have a great partnership with the US Ski and Snowboard, and several NCAA coaches who are, again, very like individually supportive of USCSA, because they see the opportunity of, all these kids who want to get on their team don't make it. And then what do they do? And so they're excited about the USCSA. And so I think it's just this effort to kind of like create some more cohesion around it and brand awareness, which Jay, spoke about his work with marketing. We've spent a lot of time trying to improve. And I think it's just, sometimes brand awareness is a slow moving machine, and we're doing our best. But if you have more ideas, we're always happy to listen.
Not on this episode, but
Separate episode.
Another episode. So where's the USCSA headed? Like, what is the 5-10 year plan in terms of the organization? You talked about a couple of new sports joining, which is interesting. What does the future portend for the organization?
Yeah, so a couple different things I would say there. So one is, I think different than other organizations, I wouldn't automatically say that the goal is just to grow. There is a limit in some ways as to how many people we can have at events and field sizes and stuff like that. So of course, we want to be able to provide as much opportunity to as many people as possible. We're also looking as an organization to partner more with the rest of the industry. So continuing those conversations with US Ski and Snowboard. I'm on the growth committee at the National Ski Areas Association to talk about competition and racing as a pathway to get involved in skiing during college and after. And so I'm representing that target age group that we're working on, the 24. So just collaborating more, which also I think will organically create more awareness about the organization, to your previous question, which is great. We're also thinking about challenges that the industry faces. So things like finding volunteers and officials. There's a lot that goes into becoming an official. And so making sure that we have a bench of people who can help put on these events is important as well. And so how can we support those efforts? So a lot of kind of different sized initiatives, if you will, for the future of the organization. But, like I said earlier, we're 52, and I hope we're around for a really long time. And, having a membership of about 5,000 athletes, plus all the volunteers and everything is, it's a tremendous amount of people to sort of stay connected with. But our goal is to just continue engaging alumni as they graduate too, and keep them involved, and kind of keep this as a self-perpetuating organization, if you will, in that sense.
Is there anything in specific that you're particularly excited about? An initiative, I don't know, new sport, new banner?
I mean, the only new sport that, at least that I'm aware of, is moguls, but maybe a new sport will come along, because that was a surprise, as it is. We didn't seek it out, but we got contacted by people who are aware of the organization. And so I'm actually pretty excited about that. I feel like we talked about that more than I thought we would, but it's really cool, just unto itself, as well as just indicative of the fact that we are able to take on some of these new, areas of interest that people have. So I believe one of those events might be in April. So if we still have snow out here, I hope to be able to go to it, because I think it's going to be out west. So that's really cool. We also are trying to grow awareness out west in the freeski and snowboard disciplines, which just anecdotally has always surprised me, there isn't more awareness about it out west. And so we are partnering with Westminster University to put on a big event at Brighton on February 13th. So in 3 days. It's a rail jam event. It's for snowboarders and free skiers, men and women. And it's for any college athlete. Like, you don't have to be on a USCSA team this year. We've opened it up to everybody. And so the opportunity there is to just have snowboard and Freeski be more accessible, more open. They've curated this whole thing with a DJ and prizes and, all of this fun stuff. It is a USCSA event. And so the hope is to have, more engagement in those sports out west. So that's another exciting one. So we've added Big Air in Freeski to nationals this year. So that's another big one. So there's a lot of stuff I'm excited about.
All right. I want to thank you very much for joining me. It has been a wonderful conversation. Sorry we lost Jay in the middle of the ending here, but appreciate you joining me for the episode.
Thank you so much. This has been super fun and really interesting. And I appreciate you, wanting to talk about the USCSA. It's a unique organization, and I thank everyone for listening.
It is, and it's a great story to hear. Thanks again. If you're a high school athlete or a parent, coach, or guidance counselor helping someone through the college search process, I hope this conversation opened your eyes to what is possible. The U.S. Collegiate Ski and Snowboard Association puts nearly 5,000 athletes on snow every winter, and for many students, it's the pathway that keeps them competing, connected, and part of a team in college. So if you know someone navigating college applications who wants to keep ski racing, riding, or competing in snow sports, share this episode with them. Spread the word that there are real options beyond the handful of NCAA programs people usually hear about. Opportunities exist. Sometimes people just need to know where to look. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time on Fresh Corduroy.